Welcome to 21st Sports Recap and Reaction for the Seattle Seahawks versus St. Louis Rams Week 1 matchup in the 2015 NFL season. We're going to go over the stats and the scoring summary and give our analysis. If you want a more in-depth breakdown, leave a comment in the comment section below and we will do our best to oblige. Let's start off in the first quarter. Less than 5 minutes left in the first, and Tyler Lockett takes it 57 yards on the punt return as the Rams have been backed up against their own end zone and kicking out of the end zone, and Lockett takes it all the way to the house. He's done it a couple times in the preseason, and he does it here in this game as he puts the first points on the scoreboard with a punt return. So with the extra point by Hushka, it was 7-0 Seattle after one. So then in the second quarter, Tavon Austin ran it 16 yards for a touchdown to tie the score up after the extra point by Zerline. So it was 7-7, and that was just 5 seconds into the second quarter. And then about the midway point in the second quarter, Greg Zerline added another 3 points to the scoreboard with a 33-yard field goal, which is actually the same distance as extra points this year, but this was a field goal, so it counted for 3. And then with 1 second left, Hushka got in on the act as he had a 25-yard field goal, and it was tied up at 10 heading into halftime. So it was a defensive battle in this game, but we'll get back to that in a moment. Here in the third quarter, though, with a little less than 10 minutes left in the third, Hushka hit a 27-yard field goal, and now Seattle was up 13-10 over St. Louis. Then, with a little over 6 minutes left in the third, Nick Foles ran it in himself 1 yard for the touchdown, and with the extra point by Celine, it was 17-13. So then, with less than 2 minutes later, Tavon Austin said he wanted to get in on that punt return action as he takes a punt 75 yards. As we saw some excellent special teams in this game, and now St. Louis had extended their lead after the extra point by Zerline, and it was 24-13 Rams over the Seahawks as they extended their lead to 11 points heading into the fourth quarter. With about 12 minutes left to play, Jimmy Graham gets in the end zone with a 7-yard pass from Russell Wilson, the newly acquired ex-Saint, and they end up going for 2, and Marshawn Lynch ran it up the middle, and it was now a 3-point game with the score St. Louis 24, Seattle 21. Hushka would then tie the game up with less than 5 minutes left in regulation with a 35-yard field goal, so it was knotted up at 24. And then, just moments later, there'd be a fumble recovery by Kerry Williams, and that he'd take it 8 yards, and it was 31-24 after Hushka kicked the extra point. So now Seattle was up by a touchdown, but then with less than a minute left to play in regulation, Nick Foles finds Lance Kendricks for a 37-yard touchdown, and this game was tied up at 31, and we would head to overtime. And then in overtime, to start things off, Pete Carroll, he likes to take chances sometimes, and he goes for an onside kick to start off overtime. That would end up backfiring, and as an end result, we ended up with the Rams winning this game in overtime. Greg Zerline hit a 37-yard field goal to put them up 34-31. Seattle would still get an opportunity, but the St. Louis Rams were able to stop Marshawn Lynch on 4th and 1, and they brought this game to a close. So they just needed 1 yard, and Beast Mode was not able to pick it up, which actually, if you go back to the Super Bowl, it shows that it's not a guarantee just that you're going to pick up a yard on a run. Here, 4th and 1, they get shut down, and that was the game. And I'm not even sure this is an upset, really. It's in St. Louis. They always play, the Seahawks tough, even though the Seahawks are the NFC West defending champions and the NFC defending champions. It's always a tight game in St. Louis. And really, the big difference here was no Cam Chancellor. The Seahawks are desperately missing Cam. They need to pay that man first thing in the morning. They really should get the deal done tonight. They need to get on the phone with Cam and give him whatever he wants and get him back on the field ASAP. Because if you don't have Cam Newton, it ain't the Legion of Boom. It's more like the Legion of Flume. And so, I mean, Nick Foles lit them up. And Nick Foles was looking like he looked back when he first got the starts in Philly. I mean, he had 297 passing yards, 18 for 27, just one touchdown, but no interception. So he wasn't having too much. He was having more trouble with the pass rush than he was having with the secondary. And Russell Wilson on the other side, 32 for 41, as they were leaning on the pass a little bit too heavy in this game. And he had 251 yards, one touchdown, one interception. Like I said, good completion percentage. The turnover really hurt, though. And they really, they should have ran the ball more. Of course, against St. Louis, it's tough to get the ball going on the ground. Marshawn Lynch had 18 carries for 73 yards. Wilson had 8 carries for 31 yards. Fred Jackson just 3 carries for 13 yards. And for St. Louis, Cunningham had 16 carries for 45 yards, as they weren't really having too much success on the ground either. Cunningham, though, had over 100 total yards, as he had 4 receptions and 77 receiving yards to go along with that 45 on the ground. And Tavon Austin, he actually had 17 rushing yards off 4 attempts. He had negative receiving yards off of 2 receptions, 2 negative yards, but he had that 75-yard punt return as he took that one to the house. That was very impressive. And then we look at Jared Cook. He had 5 receptions for 85 yards, the tight end. And like I said, Cunningham was actually their second leading receiver. And their leading receiver as a receiver was Bailey, Stedman Bailey, with 3 receptions for 58 yards. Like I said, Cook and Cunningham as a tight end and running back had bigger days in terms of receptions and yards. Kendricks had 2 receptions for 42, and Kenny Britt 2 receptions for 37 yards. But over on the Seattle side, Javon Curse 8 receptions for 76 yards. Jimmy Graham 6 receptions, but just 51 yards. He did get in the end zone. He did have that 1 touchdown. Baldwin 7 receptions, 35 yards. Tyler Lockett 4 receptions for 34 yards to go along with his punt return that he had there for a touchdown, the 57-yarder. And Lynch had, 5 receptions for 31 yards to go along with his 73 yards on the ground to go over 100 total yards in the game for Marshawn Lynch as he was getting his production. But the kickers, both sides, good production from the kickers, is neither kicker missed a kick in this game. Of course, it was inside the dome. But Hushka, 3 for 3 for the field goals, 2 for 2 on the extra points. Zerline, I've heard it said both ways, and no matter which way I say it, someone will tell me, you're saying his name wrong. I apologize. I don't, how do you say it right? Because one person says it's Zerline, one person says it's Zerline. It's like tomato, Zerline, dun, dun, dun. But anyway, so 2 field goals, 4 extra points. Very impressive day for Zerline, however you want to say it. And the special teams, too. The special teams looked really good. And the defense, though, the St. Louis defense, 6 sacks. And this is against a very mobile quarterback in Russell Wilson. But they were giving him plenty of problems all day long. It's amazing he had such a high completion percentage. But, of course, that heavy pressure is what did lead to that 1 pickoff that he had. But, yeah, Joyner with 7 tackles. He had a sack. Aaron Donald in his sophomore season here, 2 sacks for Donald. He also had 2 sacks for Robert Quinn. Robert Quinn, one of the best sack artists in the game, and Sims had a sack as well. So that's 6 sacks. They're just tearing it up. Johnson had that 1 interception. Then over on the other end, Bennett had a sack to go along with his 4 tackles. And he also had a sack by Williams to go along with his 3 tackles. And the leading tackler was Earl Thomas with 6 tackles. But like I said, they were missing Cam. They were definitely need to get Cam Chancellor back on the field to shore up that secondary or else more quarterbacks are going to have days like Nick Foles did, as he almost had 300 yards in this game. The Seahawks did have more first downs, 21 first downs to just 19 for St. Louis, and they had more third down conversions, as they were 8 for 19 versus 6 for 11, but St. Louis did have a higher percentage, as they found themselves in far fewer third down situations. Whereas, 19 third downs for the Seahawks, just 11 for the Rams. They're pretty close on total net yards. The Rams, had a 352 versus 343 for the Seahawks. The Seahawks actually outrushed the Rams 124 net yards to 76 for St. Louis, but St. Louis had more passing yards net with 276 versus 219. Of course, gross Foles with 297 versus 251 for Wilson, but Wilson had that pick. And then the time of possession was in favor of Seattle. They had the ball almost 10 minutes longer in this game. They had it 37 minutes and 28 seconds versus 28 minutes and 32 seconds for the Rams. So the Rams defense was on the field for almost 40 minutes. Of course, that includes, halftime. So there's a little extra time there as well. But they weren't really on the field that much on halftime per se. Of course, the Seahawks did get all the way down there. They were on the verge. They came close. And you made the argument that, really the difference was the Rams with that run defense stuff in Marshawn at the end. But if you look at the whole game, the Seahawks were in a position a few times to really, close this game out, but they couldn't do it. They said a big part of why they had trouble closing this one out was no Cam. Especially with the minute left, that 37-yard touchdown pass from Foles to Kendricks, I don't think that happens if you have Cam on the field. Of course, nothing to take away from that Rams defense is they did a phenomenal job. That didn't have anything to do with that side of the ball. You know what I mean? Seahawks still did put up 31 points. That's a lot of points. Of course, 18 of which came in the fourth quarter. So at that point, they had been shutting them down all day long. And heading into the fourth quarter, they were up by 11 points. But then, they allowed the Seahawks to take the lead. But then they came back. Nick Foles comes up clutch in the final minute to tie this game up and send it to overtime. So very impressive performance by Nick Foles. And that was the question going into the season. That was where, part of me wanted to pick the Rams to win their division, but I didn't have the confidence in Nick Foles. And it's just 1 week, but if he can play like this and if he can protect the ball the way we know he can, as he had in the past when he was having success in Philadelphia before he took kind of a turn for the worse there at the later time there, even though he didn't really play there that long. But if he can play like he did when he first came out the gates, which is he looked more like that here with his production and with the way he protected the ball, he keeps playing like this, then the Rams will go far, especially with that defense. Even though they got to let up less points, but like I said, a lot of that came in the fourth quarter. And a lot of that was due to the fact that they were on the field for so much. Whereas that's something the Rams got to work on is that running game. And for the Rams, you got to just hope that Curley can get healthy and get on the field and get them some production out of that backfield. Because if the Rams are on the field this much, that's not going to be a good thing. And like I said, that's part of the reason why in the fourth quarter the Seahawks put up 18 points, whereas they'd been shutting them down early on. But a defense can only do so much, and if they're on the field for almost 40 minutes, that's not a good thing. But they pulled this one off, a very impressive win in overtime against their division rivals. So it's a big win. Like I said, the Seahawks, Russell Wilson actually was pretty good in the game. And Marshawn Lynch, he was productive as well. They need Jimmy Graham to be a little more productive. It's just his first game there. And a lot of it, had to do with their defense as well. So, they got to get Cam. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for listening. It is greatly appreciated. I hope you had a good day and had a great weekend. And enjoy all the sports.